conversations, definitely, feel free above, but promise this will be an interesting talk, so I'd suggest you stay. So here we go.
So I introduced myself quickly before. So my name is Silke Elrifai. I'm the Chief Legal Officer, General Counsel of GNOSIS Group. I'm based in Berlin. We are doing quite a lot of different things, but one of the projects we are working on at the moment is we're creating a DAO. It's a DX DAO, and over the course of trying to find a legal arrangement for this DAO, and let me just check, does everyone know what a DAO is? A decentralized autonomous organization? Okay, so I'm going to say in a minute what a DAO is, but we're trying to do this code-based organization, and we had realized that there are a lot of legal issues. And the legal issues are usually, they come when there's a third party that is unhappy about it. So it's all about inter-DAO relationships. And most approaches, and we're going to speak about this in the next panel, is like looking at which jurisdiction has good grounding or good laws where we can like anchor the DAO. For this short presentation, I'm actually taking a different route, because blockchain, as it is fundamentally unterritorial, and we shouldn't have to deal, or it shouldn't be the question that we deal with nation-state law. Maybe we should look at international law. So I just came back from DC. The American Society of International Law had their annual meeting, and I'm trying to gauge to see whether there's any chance we could get some kind of DAO principles or some smart contract principles into international law. And most of the people said, well, that's stupid, or that's absurd, or what you're saying. But there were quite a few even older members, very distinguished people, said, yeah, you can pull this off. You can make it at least soft law. So what I'm trying to do is with you go through these principles, and it would be nice to have a kind of a discussion, and after that I'll take, or some other people, we will take care of trying to make this soft law in international law. So there were some people in the audience that weren't too familiar with decentralized autonomous organization. They've been around for a little while, quite infamous. In 2016, there was the DAO that was very, very successful at the beginning, and then there was a hack, and after that, the community needed some time to regenerate and to build the basic infrastructure to make this happen. So this is a PDF, just because our machine is a bit broken. So let me just go down to explaining. So these are just 6 principles, which I would want to hope, and some other people would want to hope, and it's not just my work. We actually worked at the Koala workshop in Paris on this with 4 other people, including him. On like these principles, and they're not set in stone. It's just like, this is the first draft. So, but let me go through to how we're going to define a DAO for this principle so that we can start thinking about it. We thought that there are a lot of different definitions of DAO. Some say it's just basically a conglomeration of interacting smart contracts that simulate an organization, like a company or some other entity. Our definition is this. I really want your input on it. So a DAO, like a decentralized or distributed autonomous organizations, means a smart contract-based, hierarchical, distributed and trustless network that operates according to transparent and stakeholder-governed rules on a permissionless blockchain. Yeah. So there I need to say, this is of course not really suitable for computational law yet. So after we agreed this principle in plain English, we will then change them into something that's suitable for computational law. So this is a definition. I just wanted you to see, so in case people do not know what a DAO is, that they get a little bit more understanding about it. But to go back to this question is, how do you establish, so first we need to think about how do we establish international law? I mean, how do we get these principles in there? And how you, there are different ways, but this is a very simplified version of how we're going to do it. We draft a written instrument, international instrument, setting out how we want the inter-DAO relations to be governed. So basically the DAO with third parties, that third parties can be governments, there can be other DAOs, there can be individuals. After we've done that, and that's what I would want your input in right now, we make it becomes soft law, you know, they're then frequently cited, there will be a commentary on those principles, there will be acceptance, states will look at it for their own legislation, and by that stage, so the more, you know, you talk about it, the easier it gets to make something soft law. And I think up to that stage, it is actually possible, and even the most, my 90-year-old former boss at the Yugoslavian tribunal, who's a distinguished judge, he said, well, yeah, I think you can pull this off. So we will get there. And then the more moonshot idea is hardening these principles into international law by incorporation in a treaty or state practice. It could be part of a treaty on how to deal with smart contracts, for example. So at this stage, we don't have any, we have different treaties, but not on smart contracts. There have been attempts to write an investment treaty which incorporated, for example, IOTA, but the people weren't too happy. So this is how it could get into international law. We could get an international treaty on this. But before we do that, normally it's easier to start this off with soft principles, which you can use as guidance. And that's what we're trying to do here. So we are at the stage one, the drafting. So at the Koala, so Koala is the Coalition for Automated Legal Applications. It's headed by Constance Joyce and Primavera Di Filippi. They do these workshops all around the world. The last one in Paris, we worked on these principles because we kind of got fed up with looking at different nation-state law and how we could seat our DAOs there. So the first one, we need to define the scope of these principles. So the easier the better. These basic principles apply to the interaction of DAOs with their participant and third parties. And as you see, we've defined those three parties, DAOs, participant, and third parties. And that's actually the second principle. So give us a definition I had already looked at for the DAO, which I would like your input, whether you think we have there's a lot of space of improvement for this. Then the participant is defined as the controller of a digital public address. It would probably be an Ethereum address, which has the right to participate in a DAO that is a participant. And what are assets? Assets shall include on and off-chain assets. We've defined third parties very broadly. This could also be improved. Third party shall mean any person, including a natural person, corporate or unincorporated body, like a cooperative, for example, a government, state agency, whether or not they have legal personality. Because with the issue with the DAO is, of course, also that we don't get legal personality. We want legal personality for the DAO. We don't want legal personality for a company we are anchoring in the jurisdiction. What we are doing at the moment, most DAOs do this if they have organization, yeah, that is actually the point of those principles. We're trying to find something bigger than that. We think that there needs to be some kind of an identification of participants. So a DAO shall adopt an identification nomenclature of its participants. And that, importantly, that doesn't require nation-state adopted personal identification. It doesn't require passports. This is the most important provision. It's basically a DAO shall enjoy legal personality. There's still a question on whether this should be international legal personality. A DAO shall be liable for its obligations with its assets. A participant of a DAO shall not be liable for the DAO's obligation, and the DAO is not liable for the obligation of its participants. This is like, if we want DAOs to fly, we need to kind of limit liability, and at the moment it is through this anchoring mechanism, and we're going to speak about this in the next panel, actually. There'll be other topics, but that will be one of them. With those principles, we would like this to be understood internationally that the participant isn't responsible for the obligations of the DAO, because in US law, in most of European laws, including German and French law, the situation is at the moment that the default option of a DAO is a general partnership. So as a general partnership, any participant could be liable and for the actions of a DAO, and well, that is a huge risk. If we want this to fly, this risk needs to disappear. And then the fifth principle, and these seem all really obvious perhaps, but not in international law. A DAO may have assets and may freely dispose of them. And the last one, participation in DAO is an opt-in voluntary process. When we started to work on this, there were many others, so like, okay, what should the members have? But this shouldn't be like, the easier, the more straightforward principles are, the easier it's possible to incorporate them into something bigger than the nation-state law. So we didn't consider it necessary to actually set out the termination rights or membership's rights in that organization, because this would be the DAO's terms of participation, not something like that. Yeah, so basically those 6 principles, they were worked on with Anja Blaž, Martina Markesic, Professor Florence Guillaume. She's a distinguished professor in private international law in Switzerland, Constant Choice and myself, and with the help also with Tim Banzema at the Koala workshop. So it's not just my work. Yeah, I'd like your contributions and ideas, questions, whatever.
So, questions? Well, first of all, round of applause, right? Pretty good. International law, it's getting real up in here. So, any questions or feedback? I think I'd promised at one point for Brooklyn Law current students would have first dibs, so why don't you get us started, and then you're next.
Thank you very much. I think it's a very good idea. The only question I have is, did you think that it would have also been important to, as a corollary to one of the principles, that the DAO can have assets and freely dispose of it, but it can also be obligated? No, like also be obligated, like if they were to take on a loan or some sort, that obligation lies with them.
Test 1.
Oh, wait, one sec. Hello? This is better. Yeah, so we thought about that, and we considered that because we give the DAO legal personality, they would be able to have obligations, and it's also, I mean, intrinsic in
This is a little better.
So it's also intrinsic in our principle 4 that they basically have the DAO would stand in. So of course the DAO, like they interact with the real world, they're embedded in the on-chain world, and because of this they can do harm to people. So it should be, at the moment it's like every member can severally and jointly be liable. So it would be much better if the DAO that has, like if it's on the Ethereum blockchain, you need to have some assets. It has assets and it should pay with those assets for its liabilities, and not like the lowest hanging fruit. But that is, so you think it would be good to put that in a separate article? Okay. Yeah, no, this is a good idea. So basically you say that a DAO can be obligated. Good. That would be a good amendment. This is being recorded or something, then I can remember this later.
Yes, it's fine.
Oh, perfect. Then I can work that into the document. Yeah.
Are there any examples of already existing or projects that were leading up to kind of trans nation state legal entities? Like, is there a legal entity that exists now that is both legal within the US and within another country? Or are the nation states the only actors right now regulating the types of entities, legal entities?
So what, in terms of corporate law, there are a few, you have international institutions that are on that kind of level. So, but that's also basically where the nation states are the actors and they created those institutions. I think for this kind of project would be more similar to kind of, I don't know whether you're familiar with the Hague rules or like the CISG, they all became, or like the Hague Principles on the Choice of Law. This is a good example. So the Hague Principles on the Choice of Law, they're not binding because they weren't able to find state support, so they couldn't agree on stuff. And so what the Hague Conference did was they produced these 12 principles. It's maybe double the length of what I just prepared, it's quite short, to have those be referred to in international disputes, and that's actually happening. So, but it's also on the stage, so they are probably like comparable to what we are trying to do on the organizational level. I haven't seen it other than for international institutions that have actually international legal personality. So we try to do it, but this is, I mean, this project, this is more medium term. Like, I mean, international law is very slow.
Other questions? Okay. Like Phil Donahue here. Here you go.
Thank you. My name is Mongko. I'm from yescoin.com, and I'm interested to learn more about e-identification that you mentioned. From what you have gathered with your working group, what kind of e-identification that you plan to use with DAO?
Oh, the identification. So we thought right now, for example, you could build a DAO and make it like use a British, say UK company limited by a guarantee to kind of anchor it in the United Kingdom. Company limited by a guarantee doesn't have any shares, and for that you would need to put like the members of the DAO into like with their full, passport names and everything in the thing. But for example, we are building the DX DAO, and for that the membership is supposed to be fluid. We will have hopefully thousands of people participating. They might just come in, come out, and we thought that there isn't a need for these principles to have real name identification, but that the Ethereum address for this purpose would be sufficient. So that is that was principle 3. So we said as a second principle that for DAOs generally, because what the liability is covered by the assets of the DAO, there is no need to have a real name identification, but they could do it if they want to, because they're different DAOs for different things. Sometimes you do it because you need it, because on a legal basis you might have to do KYC. But we thought in the system it would be sufficient to say that it's not required to have a nation-state-based identification system.
I understand that it's not required, but
Yeah.
how do you prove that this is a participant?
Oh, the participant, any participant the participant is a controller, the one who has the control of the Ethereum address that holds your voting rights.
So how do you handle one person who have multiple Ethereum addresses?
Well, then the person is a controller, it's still one participant because you're the controller of the Ethereum address, right? So we said that the participant...
So if you go to voting and one person have millions of Ethereum addresses, does it have million votes, or how do you can...
But it depends on the DAO. So for example, it's not one person, one vote, right? Because different persons can have different voting stakes. So for example, in the DAO, your voting rights depend on how much Ether you have locked in the system or how much you have traded on the Dutch exchange protocol. Mm-hmm. And based on that, you get, and the Ethereum address that takes part gets a voting right allocation. So you will still have, if you have 5 Ethereum addresses, you still have a participant as the controller behind it. At least this is how we defined it right now in the principles. If you think we should change this?
No, how do you prevent bad actors to acquire, put a large amount of money and spread out to multiple Ethereum addresses and control DAO? That is, if you don't tie into personal identification that this is one person behind this.
But it depends on the DAO. I mean, my position is, maybe I might not completely understand your question. My position is that it depends what the DAO does, right? Mm-hmm. Of course you have dark DAOs and they do whatever they want. They don't care about being anywhere regulated. That do other stuff. But on the DAO, I mean, it doesn't, for example, now again, speaking about a DAO, the voting rights are not transferable from your Ethereum address. So we set it up that way to basically for at least as long as we have, the DAO and then it's, sent to the community, they can change this. But right now, it's a kosher DAO. It does everything legally and without any... So we were staying clear from securities regulation. We like the reputation. We use DAO stacks framework, so they call it the reputation, the voting rights. They are just addressed to one address and you can't transfer it. There's no bonding curve to get your money or whatever it is. It's not even a value. Right? It depends on the DAO, what they do.
I would like to see is to expand on this area where it can... We hope to build DAO that serve good purpose, good causes for the society and the world. So if we can have mechanism to prevent bad actors to take advantage of the platform that we're creating would be great. Yes.
But do you think, the question in this regard is, do you think it is required on an international level to incorporate that into the principle? So basically your argument is that you want to have KYC in my principles, basically. What are my principles, the principles?
Could I take a whack at what I think you're saying? If I understand it correctly, it's a follow-on from your insight that it depends on what the DAO is doing. So it depends, but so far you've been articulating one set of things it could do for which KYC is not needed. Let's explore the other things that DAOs could do for which KYC may be needed. So maybe something in international law at a soft principle before drafting might be an acknowledgement that if the scope covers things that DAOs may do, that where one person, one vote matters, or we're tying it down to you're a voter in Brooklyn, or you're a resident in Brooklyn, that's why you participate in this city project-oriented DAO, or you can postulate other times when tying it to an individual or attributes about a single individual could be what the DAO does. Well, then maybe the international principle should also allow for that. Or the other way to go as a drafting principle could be to scope the international thing to say we're not dealing with those things, we're just dealing with this type. But addressing it somehow more explicitly, I think is what you're suggesting would be useful. Okay, and he agreed to that what I said is what he said.
So basically so you want to change the second one to the nomenclature may require nation-state adopted personal identification, but in other cases it does not, or something like that.
And that's right. And so now speaking on my own behalf as an identity geek for decades, I would actually parse it three ways. One is that sometimes it may not exactly as you're saying now. A second one would be it may require state issued ID, like, I don't know, could we do our passports or could we, vote or something like that on a DAO? But then the third one, which I think is most important, is when there's a source of personal identification, but it's not from the state. It comes from,
social media?
Well, you could do social media. You could do from your political group, from your union, from your community group, from some self-sourced type of thing, like with self-sovereign identity. But there's sources of valid, legit, like I sign most contracts DAZA Greenwood. The government, that's not registered with government on my birth certificate, but it's the name that I go by, and it's certainly enforceable in contract. And so there's many sources of identity, naming, and other identity attributes that are not government issued, but they still serve identity purposes. And that would be the third category that you might consider allowing for.
Yeah, that's good. Great.
Do we have time? So let me just do a check. So we've got one more lunch talk on ISOC. And how many questions? One, Ori, and did I see another one? And a follow-up question. Okay, so let's do Ori first.
Hey, I had a question about the entity being liable for its debts, or liable. How does that make sense? Because there's no legal authority that can seize the assets of the DX DAO. So just saying that it's liable for its debts doesn't mean it will, or that it can be.
Well, I think enforcement at this stage would be again on the state level. So the idea would be that the states that have no laws on DAOs would consider that instead of going after the individuals, they would go after the actual DAO, because it's the DAO that has the assets. And because, if you don't anchor your system anywhere, you do a DAO without a legal entity, you can be sued anywhere, basically. So this doesn't resolve any issue of being dealt with the enforcement would be through, at the moment, and for probably a long time, on the state level.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you have a DAO that's just like a multi-sig, that's 20 of 1,000 signatures need to validate every transaction, and someone lent the DAO, 100 Ether, and then it's not paying it back. You can't compel that quorum from that group of signature holders to, unless you go after every single one of them individually and seize their private key. I don't understand how the law could enforce the way it does with corporations liability.
I think it would probably be set up, it depends on the setup of the DAO. So if your DAO is basically a huge multi-sig, this would, you're right. Then what would happen is that the regulator, wherever, let's say the Mongolian regulator wants to go after the DAO, they would try to find someone, identify the person, have a tracing agency, go after them, see whether they have enough money. If they have a lot of money, they're going to go after. Yeah, so you still have that problem, but I think most, and maybe this is just my assumption, is that you have much more advanced setups now for DAOs. But that is a good point to consider.
Last question from Steve.
Yeah, my statement was just in relation to the idea about principle 2, I think it was, which is about the identification. I don't think the principle itself needs to be changed in its language, because I think the second part of the principle nomenclature does not require nation-state adopted personal identification is sufficient. It is not necessary. It's not a necessary feature, but you can have it as a feature of a DAO.
Yeah, I think
Sorry, speaking of identity, this is Chris. This is not Steve. Sorry, as you were. Everybody's Steve in my book, I guess.
No.
It's a nice.
With the third, so I mean, the people who dealt working on this, they were very adamant that some of the people were very adamant that they want to have nation-state identification. But I think there's room to improve this and basically to have add other things or make this more precise and allow different scenarios, as Mongol also said. So yeah, I'll have the video of that so I can then work on incorporating all the stuff. Thank you.
So substantive. General Counsel of GNOSIS, laying down the law. Okay, so thank you, Silke. We now have another quick talk from Jonathan Askin, and, well, you're Steve to me, I don't know.
So, who's seen the DAO of Steve? Raise your hand. No one? Shut up. All right, we got a couple people seen the DAO of Steve.
You might want to